First of all, thank you all for coming. My reach ROI already is through the roof, especially considering all the factors, environment, cold, rain, all that muck mess outside. So having so many of you here, I was actually kind of totally prepared for having like 2-3 here and saying, all right, to heck with presentation, we'll just talk and you throw questions at me and I'll answer. So my part one is already done. What now I need to accomplish is some engagement and retention ROI. So I'm already starting with ROI. I know it's a passion with me. People say I talk a lot about it. My husband says I talk too much about it. So what we're going to talk today is really about measuring how your contribution evaluates with the results out there. Because let's be honest, nothing that we do is done without results in mind. And if you're doing something without results in mind in this fast-paced, economy-driven world, we're doing something wrong. So keeping that in mind, most marketers, advertisers, communicators, when interviewed, will agree that ROI is one of the single most important influencing factors which determine how they measure their performance. And let me know if I'm blocking the view. I tend to walk a lot. So, but those same marketers, when asked how to do it, have trouble really telling you if the methods they're using are really right or not. So what is ROI? It's very simple when you talk about the mathematical formula. It's literally your profit minus the investment cost derived on your investment cost. So in layman's term, it's the return that you get and what you invest. If I invested $50 in a pair of shoes, which lasted me for, say, 10 years, I have a pretty good ROI. If those same shoes were lying in a box for 20 years and I didn't wear them, what would be my ROI? Well, what if they are limited edition Jimmy Choos, which sold on eBay for $500? What is my ROI then? So there's a lot of, what I'm trying to say is there's tons and tons of factors which are involved. So let's scratch this beautiful, easy formula out of the window. Easy enough. ROI is your return on investment, is the benefit an investor looks for based on how much they invested and what they're getting in return for it. ROI applies to marketing, it applies to finance, it applies to your day-to-day life. The uses are endless, the possibilities are endless. Making sure that you're calculating it correctly. The potential of errors, absolutely limitless. I am not trying to scare you. So, and high ROI indicates a beneficial result and increased gains related to your cost or spend. This is logical enough. It analyzes your tools, as I said, and it analyzes the effectiveness of your communication. Again, easy enough. And it's a way to relate profits to what you invested in. Now, as a marketer, as a communicator, as an advertiser, this is extremely important for us because when business is booming, we're golden. Nobody questions us. But when business is not booming, apart from R&D, if R&D is not a factor in your company's equation, guess who gets the first boot? Marketers, us. So in that parlance, it's very, very important to make sure what your return is. Let's go through a small story. You all had a wonderful education, you graduated, and you got a job. Yes?
I think when you say things like R&D, like just research and development, just...
Sure. Oops.
Yeah. No,
absolutely, yes. What I mean, yes. So if you're in a technical firm, yes, research and R&D gets the first cut. So that's what I mean by R&D. Next is, of course, us as communicators. Now, if you had unlimited budget, which is all of our dreams once we graduate, is to be told, here, there's a pot of unlimited money, come with me with what you think works best for this brand, and go on and play with all the resources that you have. You can go ahead and put it on traditional media. You can go ahead and run the social media campaign of your dreams. You can go ahead and invest in print media, whatever you want to do. And that's fantastic. If you had that creativity unbounded, you would get all the results that you want. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. We get a limited pot of gold, and in that, we need to make sure what our investment is, what we're getting out of it, and what our return is going to be. What can we really accomplish out of the limited resources that we have at our disposal? Now, when we say what can we accomplish, now that's where the biggest conundrum lies. What are you going to really evaluate? Are you going to evaluate your reach? Are you going to evaluate your cost savings? Are you going to evaluate your gain, your increase in viewership, your increase in brand engagement? What exactly are you going to park as your gain? Because, I mean, if you look at it, really, either one of this when parked is not incorrect, right? So mark in mind, when I go further down and talk about types of marketing ROIs, we'll come back to this particular conundrum as to which is your true indicator of ROI. Now, what I said before, high ROI, low ROI, it's very obvious that anything that has an ROI in negative is terrible. Anything with a positive ROI is good. Anything with a higher positive ROI is tremendous. So keeping that in mind, the very simple formula and the very simplistic explanation, we're on a good path until we go further ahead, and then there are lots of forks in the road, and then we need to choose which fork to take. But we're not just talking about ROI. We're talking about marketing ROI. And that's when we start complicating our matters, because here the biggest question mark is what is your profit? Profit / gain / return. What exactly are you parking there? And that is all that determines what this number is going to be. So while 76% of marketers agree that ROI is a huge win when they're trying to get these resources for the next year, for a new campaign, for an existing initiative, or a new initiative for an existing brand. Only 13% of marketers are really confident that the numbers they're projecting or the numbers that they are giving are really accurate and have a basis of solid foundation. So we talked about ROI in a very quick grasp, but what I want to do is concentrate more on this particular thing, which relates to us, everyone in the room, is talk about marketing ROI and talk about the different forms of it. So at any point of time, if I'm going too fast or if I'm saying stuff which probably makes sense to me, but is something that's slightly difficult for you to stop, chime in, tell me, so that I can reshift the gears and talk more to your advantage. So I'll proceed if everyone's okay with it. Okay? All right. So what is marketing ROI? Taking the very same formula and saying profit investment cost over investment cost. Now we already determined that profit is the big question mark, the big what, when, how. But let's not make it too easy, because this particular part, investment cost, is just as difficult. How are you going to determine what is your true cost of doing a particular campaign? So let's take an example. You're running a television campaign and you say, okay, I'm running a television campaign. My media buy is my spend. If you're engaging an agency to shoot your media, your agency cost gets included in your investment cost. So that's 2. If you're hiring a talent, and that is additional cost that goes into there. Your editing costs, your all of this goes into your investment. But is that all? Is that the sum total of everything that you invest? Can you think of anything that you might? Time. Our time, right? Your time into thinking up a campaign, designing a campaign, because somebody's hiring you and somebody's paying you really good amount of money to think these things. So that gets added. You're going to the office and you are using the premises, you're using the resources, so your overhead costs. People who are really taking care of you, your HR, your admins, your payroll, all of that, admin costs, all of this needs to be divided. And I know most of us, I did the same when I graduated. I'm like, okay, I'm a marketer. This is not my headache. All I need to do is make sure that I give the best possible solutions. I'm going to create this trailblazing campaigns which are going to get me all these awards, and people are going to say, oh, that is the most iconic ad I've ever seen out there. Everybody knows my name, and that's going to be my ROI because everybody is going to know my brand because I did a wonderful job. Now, in doing that wonderful job, what I had taken out of equation most of the times early on in my career is what was the cost of going on inside it. To me, it was like, okay, they're going to give me a budget and I'm just going to go ahead and then do a campaign within that cost. Or even if I didn't have a cost, why can't I have a TV ad and then I already have the resources, so why can't I repackage it and make it into a radio ad? Just take the audio. Back when I graduated, digital was still called web design. So don't guess my age, or guess. But it was called multimedia and web design. So we didn't have display ads, we didn't have nav ads, we didn't have text ads. None of those existed. It's a brand new frontier for us, which leads to even more issues over here coming soon to the screen near you. So what is marketing ROI? ROI, or marketing ROI, really differs from the basic explanation of ROI. And why? The single most factor that affects us is that there's a high risk involved. Usually, when you talk about investments, you're saying, okay, I'm buying a house, I'm putting X amount of money in it. 15 years later, I'm selling it, I'm getting so much money back. Deduct the cost of living, you're not paying rent, add the taxes, and then if you're making a profit, wonderful, your ROI is good. If you bought a house and the market tanked and you're selling it for less than what you bought, oh, terrible ROI. Same goes for your blue chip stocks. Same go for if you were investing in any sort of asset out there. Now, we marketers like to call our creation assets, but truly, there's no tangible asset. It's an absolute risk. I'm taking this money, investing it in a particular activity. What my result is going to be of that activity is absolutely uncertain. I don't know if I'm going to reach out to people. I don't know if I'm going to get the responses that I'm expecting. And I'm not even talking about sales here, because we can park our metrics very variedly. So keeping that in mind, and the fact that it's an absolute ROI, we want to really, what we want to do is figure out how our actions best impact profits and how we want to identify what metrics we can use, what benchmarks we can use to get to that number, which we can then present and say, yes, we're doing a good job with what we're doing and what we're investing. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're going to talk about. Now, what are the different types of ROI? Because this is such an intangible subject, you can go ahead and really you can classify ROI into various different buckets. But for ease of understanding and the fact that we only have limited time to really talk about it, what I've done is I've broadly classified it into 5, which is engagement, branding, learning, relationship building, and sales. And I'll walk you through each one of them so that you know in what stage in your career, in what stage in your brand's career and lifestyle, what you need to apply. And keep an open mind, because what we are talking can absolutely be shifted and applied to anything in life, whether, and I know that there are no numbers always available for what, but your returns can be empirically calculated, whether it's on your relationship, whether it's on your education, whether it's on your career graph. So all of this can broadly be implied to all other factors in your life. And that's something that I do try to do. I'm not sure if I always succeed, but going on to our first one is engagement ROI. As the name suggests, it's the investment on how, it's your return on how well you're engaging with your customer or your potential customer or your audience. Now, this is, keep in mind, I keep saying engagement, I keep saying relationship, because back when I was in school, it was a simple formula. You sold or you didn't sell. If you didn't sell, you tanked and your career tanked. If you sold, fantastic. But the way that we're moving more and more towards relationship building with our client, with our audience. And so we are adding a lot of these intangible ideas into a tangible world. So when it comes to engagement ROI, it's a very high measurable metric. Why? Because it's, in simple terms, it's your reach ROI. How many people are you reaching? Remember when I came in and I said, oh, my reach ROI is fantastic because I have a room full of people in such bad weather. That's because I'm already reaching out to a bunch of you. You're recording me, so it's going to go online. People are going to watch it. My viewership is going to be hopefully high. And so my reach metric is already achieved. My investment was probably 2 weekends of time, making sure that I don't have spelling errors in my presentation, that I'm really putting effort into what I want to say, and that what I want to say is reflected here. So 2 weeks of investment, 12 years of working on this topic, and then all of you in this room. So reach ROI, fantastic. Why? Because what I'm looking here is simple, measurable terms. I'm talking about how many people are in the room, how many views I'm getting on my social media posts, how many TRPs I'm getting on my television or radio ads, how much circulation I'm getting. So it's a very high identifiable metric. When you do, I mean, how many of you are interning or working with some business out there? Okay, so you have some interaction with vendors, with customers. You probably have, at some point of time, researched some of the metrics, some of the channels that you want to advertise at. So have you noticed that whenever people reach out to you, they have fantastic numbers to give to you? They'll tell you, oh, we reach 2.5 million people, and your investment is just 10 grand. So calculate your ROI, it's going to be fantastic. Have you heard somewhere some of such statements come at you? If you haven't, you'll hear them a lot once you start actually participating in buys. So this is what they're giving you. They're giving you the engagement ROI. Now, we have high control over data because we know what we're pushing through, right? We're packaging our message. We are controlling the narrative. We are controlling the medium of interacting with our customer, and we are controlling when and how many times we're pushing that same message to our customer. So it's a very high control data. But it's a very short-term ROI. Your ROI only handles, only engages your audience for a limited amount of time. Does anybody here know what the current engagement or focus time limit is in the digital age? Well, I just attended a seminar last week, and they said it dropped from 6 to 3. Nothing to make our lives more difficult, right? 3 seconds, and you have to start engaging. If you engage them for the first 3 seconds, you're golden. If you didn't, people could have watched your ad, people could have watched your message, but after those 3 seconds, you're just playing while they're working. So yes, you paid for all those TRPs and circs, but it's a low-term short ROI. Now, who does this really help? I mean, we all use it, and we all have to use it regardless of whether with this ROI is going to impact or not. But truly, if you're a blogger or if you're a YouTube celebrity, as long as you get this number high, you're going to get all those endorsements coming in, you're going to get those affiliates knocking at your door, and you're going to start getting that income. So, good thing to know.
What's TRP?
A TRP is,
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Great. Of course. Now I won't be able to. No, don't be sorry. No, I should. So, of course, I don't remember the acronym right now at the top of my head, and it's going to hit me at the weirdest moment. But it's the circs which are counted for television and radio. So your viewership numbers are called TRPs. Yes, but there's the TRP stands for, and for the life of me right now, I wouldn't be able to tell you, so I would get totally an F if I was giving an example. Oh, yay, thank you. But, so yes. And then it has an indirect or no sales impact. Why? Because in this particular ROI, what we're trying to do is reach out to as many people as possible, and there could or could not be a direct link that brings that audience back to make that sales or a relation, because it might be too expensive to track this particular relationship. Next is branding ROI. What it does is really talk about brand awareness. Now, your brand awareness engagement could also be your engagement ROI, and vice versa, because it depends on what your messaging is. But this is more targeted. So you're not just shooting out in the dark and assuming that X amount of people are viewing your message. You're making sure that you're targeting your audience. If you're trying to sell, as I'm trying to do right now, wood flooring to people, I'm not going to go ahead and target everyone out there. I'm going to try to see how many people are really on Pinterest making boards with, say, new wood flooring, or somebody says home reno, or are on house.com, have subscription to a HGTV magazine. I'm trying to find that particular niche audience because my ad spend is higher. My spend on reaching this particular audience is higher, and so I want to make sure that I'm targeting the right people. Again, your metrics remain the same. However, this is a long-term ROI, because what you want to do is you want people to remember you, so that even 2 years later, when you're going to make a purchase, you have it at the back of your head what you want to go ahead and research. An ideal one for this is when you see advertisements for either cars, or you see advertisements for vacation packages. You have it at the back of your head that, oh, I'm going to go live in Four Seasons when I have the money to do that, and then you go back. So the brand awareness or the brand ROI of that particular brand is really strong. When I'm done with my college and I'm paid my debt, don't ask me the model, but I'm going to go buy a BMW, because for me, all of them look the same. So I know, blasphemy to a lot of people, but so their brand ROI is really high, and that's what you're trying to achieve, is that it's not a short-term ROI. When you are trying to give that message, what you're trying to make sure is that it resonates and stays with your audience for a long time, so that when they come back, they're the ones who are researching you and making sure that they come and make the purchase. It does have indirect sales impact. And why do I say indirect? Because it could be over a period of time. It might not be direct. It might not be as soon as you make that ad. So your metrics are not going to reflect that sale, because that engagement has happened a while back. Learning ROI. Now, this is very new and something that I really, really enjoyed doing when I used to work with Macy's. This was an extremely new chapter for us, because what we were trying to do is learn sentiments of people. We were trying to understand what people were talking about a certain topic, whether it's a brand, it's an idea, whether it's a product, and then going by that, you're trying to make sure what you're gaining. So here, you're not really sending the message, you're adapting the messages for them. And I'm going to give you, so this talks about emotional data. It has low numeric impact, because it requires, sometimes there are bots which will help you identify that, but you also need human interaction to see whether negative words in a particular statement really mean a positive message. Now, politics aside, one of the biggest learning ROIs of this, I would call it century, unless somebody tops it, is the past presidential election. No politics, just talking as a marketer and just talking as learning ROI. The campaign, what they did was they listened to what we were talking, whether we were talking it over social media, whether we were talking it over blogs, whether we were interacting over open forums, but things that people were talking, there was a deep search on the emotional data which was out there, and then the talking points were formulated specifically based on this particular data that they collected, which resulted in a phenomenal learning ROI. So as marketers, this to me is a case study which I found super interesting, and I thought it was a great use of tools that we had, applying it to real life and getting results out of it. Now, we have low control over this data. Why? Because we're not really sending out any messages. We're truly the recipient of all these messages. We need to know where to look, and as long as we know where to look, we'll get this data. Now, the data might be to your liking and might not be to your liking, but as a business, it's important, because I want to know whether people are talking bad about emissions before I invest in a car that has really bad mileage and high emissions, or whether what people are talking about a certain my store's perception, whether I am, so if I am a Walmart, do I want to revamp my store, or whether people or my audience is happy with what they're getting. This is a tool that lots of marketers and mainly retailers use to really map their customer service engagement. And that brings me to the next point, which is relationship ROI. We are in the business of building relationships now. We're not merely in the business of making sales. So we need to engage very directly with the customer, where we are building brand ambassadors for our customer, for our brand. Our customers are going to go and promote our brand, regardless of how much we invest in our campaigns. So this is a medium measurable metric, because you obviously know who your loyal customers are. This has both numeric and empirical data. It is a sentiment analysis, again, which requires both automated bot reading as well as human interaction. And then this is considered one of the deepest potential ROI. Why? Because today, when you go out there, Apple doesn't, yes, it advertises, but it has a relationship ROI where people will stand in line and go and buy that phone. There's a lot of reasons, not just this, but it has built that relationship where people feel like they always need to have the next phone. Okay? It's also a little bit of, they've generated the FOMO, but they've also done it based on what they know about their customer. They've built that relationship. Now, that relationship could be symbiotic. That relationship could be one-sided. But in the end, what they're building is they're really talking about people who are going to go ahead and take their message forward. They have medium control over the information, because once you put your information out there, it's your customers which are taking that information and sparsing it through. So who it goes to beyond your first line of loyal customers is something that you don't have a control over. That's when you lose the data link, and so you don't have a way of getting back as to how that third person got your data, and so there's no direct link between it. And then you control the quality of responses to the customer, but you don't control how the customer feels about you. A lot of good companies stay on top because of the kind of customer service and engagement that they have with their customers. Okay, so, and it's obviously a long-term ROI. And the last one is one of everybody's favorite and the best metric out there, which is your sales ROI. You want to make sure that whatever you do impacts the bottom line. You want to make sure that your highly measurable metric is always in the positives, that your investment is getting people to make a purchase, make a donation, subscribe, depending on what dynamic your organization runs on. Whether it's a not-for-profit and is looking for people to donate, whether it's an actual for-profit that's looking for people to buy, whether it's a service industry that wants people to subscribe or apply to its services, you're going to get this numeric data very easily, and then you're going to use that lovely simple formula that we talked about, apply it over here, and very easily get your return to make sure that next year your budgets don't get cut. We have high control over the data. It's a short-term ROI because people are just engaging in that particular point of purchase. Beyond that, unless you've cultivated your relationship ROI, they are not going to keep coming back. Unless you've cultivated your brand ROI, they're not going to remember you. And so how you go ahead with this particular data really depends on you as a communicator. So now, just to recap, we have ROI, which is gain from an investment over the cost of investment. For marketing, it's really the incremental revenue and then your contribution margin over marketing spend. What this means is you want to make sure that you're constantly going above your goal, because the unfortunate part about the businesses, if you were here, next year you're supposed to go here. But if you were here in terms of your spend, next year you're supposed to go here. And that's the crux of being in business. Budgets are always getting slashed, but your goals are always rising. But I mean, that's nothing different, right? You gave in a paper, you got an A, next time it's like, let's try harder, let's get an A+, but you had 2 weeks, this time you have maybe 1 week. So this is the struggle which is continuing in our lives, and we continue to apply it. I am not going to go into detail about the actual formula and the analysis of it. I'll be obviously leaving my presentation with Amber, so you can take these formulas and refer to them later if you need to. You probably won't need to until you graduate. So this is good. So I wanted to, before I wrap up my talk about business side of the ROI, I wanted to share a very interesting case study that we had when I was working with Macy's. When Macy's got into the .com business, it was so new that they didn't want to take a risk on their brick and mortar business, so they created an offshoot. They tucked it away in California and said it's a separate entity. Okay, fast forward 5-6 years later, their numbers were through the roof. These guys were getting ROIs as high as 300-400%. And so Macy's decided, oh, let's merge the two businesses together, because you know what, our brick and mortar store gets like 30% ROI and these guys get like 400. If we merge them together, our books are going to look so much balanced and we can get that much more investment. So I came on scene at that time, and they hired a bunch of people, myself included, and we sat to work on it. Now, as we started to work on it, we realized that a lot of these metrics were not deliberately inflated, but the numbers were not parked right. Because when you look at online sales and you look at the cost of sending out an email, it's in 1/10 of a penny. Okay, so an email, it costs like 1/10 of a penny to deploy. And if one of you went and made a purchase, I bet it's going to be more than 1/10 of a penny. So if you look at the cost of sending out that email and the returns you get back, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you, oh, you have fantastic returns. Now, do you know why this particular thing like tanked so bad? Because while they could all go ahead and measure where the point of purchase was, they could never measure what their point of return was. So if I went ahead and bought $100 worth of goods and returned $90 in a store, guess who got that $90 back? The store. And so the .com always came up favorably, and it looked like they were doing fantastically better than ever. Something else that it was such a new frontier that nobody realized that when they started their Facebook page and they got 1 million likes on it or followers, there was a big party. Facebook came, they gave out like little chapsticks with Facebook written on it. Everybody celebrated. So in a way, your reach ROI or your engagement ROI was fantastic. Do you think it had any correlation to the sales ROI? No. Because I might go there and like a page, doesn't mean I'm going to make a purchase. So what I'm trying to tell you is that data can be manipulated in various ways. You, by knowing this, have the power to manipulate your data or identify manipulators depending on which side of the spectrum I'm on. If I'm an ad agency, oh yeah, use the metrics to your advantage. Make sure you talk about reach. Don't talk about sales. Don't talk about conversions. Talk about how many people you are reaching, how many views you are getting, how many circulations you have. But if you are on the other side of the fence and you're the one who's paying that agency, make sure you focus on that ROI, which is going to get you true returns. I covered a bunch of this in my talk to you, but what I've done here is I've listed each media and what kind of metrics are important to gauge and get your numbers on, so that you make sure that you're identifying the right person. When digital media got on the scene, and you'll still find it because a lot of companies have not caught up to what's the current stage in marketing. So they still look at these numbers from traditional media. So newspapers, it's all about circulation. If you're reaching 2.5 million readers, that's wonderful and you are getting my buy. People equate the same thing to website traffic. They're like, okay, if I'm getting 2.5 million views on my websites, that's wonderful, I've done my job. But with digital media, it's getting even more easier to track what your consumer is doing, what your audience is doing. And so you go more into deep, and this is what I was talking about. You kind of go ahead and either take your acquisition or your retention rate, or your impression and click data. Again, it all depends on who you are or what side of the business you're on. Okay. This is just a little bit of about the industry metrics, and I'm just going to go ahead and put this up there. So these are some of the pitfalls, such as you have data disconnect, you have tunnel vision, and you have a disconnect in your cost evaluation. This is all something that we discussed in the example that I gave you, just listed out here for your reference. Unfortunately, I can't put my case up here. I don't want to be sued by Macy's. So nothing in writing, although they know what they did wrong. So to go back to what we discussed, best practices tailored to your product life cycle. Where are you? Are you just launching your product? Then you need to make sure that you sell the engagement ROI to your management, because at that particular time what you need to do is get your word out there. If you are again in the infancy, you need to focus on the brand awareness ROI, because you want your brand to be recognized by your customers out there. If you are an established brand, you need to talk more about relationship ROI. You need to talk more about, again, engagement ROI still stays on there, but then you're in a position to really go ahead and calculate your sales ROI. So, and then used unbiased data. As far as possible, having done this and having manipulated data, I know, and you guys will learn that too, is that you can shift numbers the way you want to a reasonable degree, but that number still should come from a source which is unbiased, which is third party, because in the end you want to know what your performance is. If you cheat, keep in mind that you cheated, but make sure that you're learning something out of whatever you're presenting, so that your next step, you're still applying what you learned. And that brings me in an indirect or direct way to what we really wanted to talk about, is how do we apply this very simple formula but a convoluted concept to what we're doing here, is trying to figure out whether we're getting the return on our education that we're getting. We all know the importance of education. I mean, just do a simple Google search and these metrics will overwhelm you. Most people tell you, yes, it has a great increase in wages. So just type in benefits of higher education and boom, boom, boom. Your first 5 results on page 1 will have in big type bold letters a wage increase of somewhere, different sites, different numbers, but everything is above 100%. They'll tell you your unemployment rate is phenomenal, you don't get laid off. They'll say, oh, your lifetime earnings will be more than $1 million, and that you will recoup your college education in 10 years. Now, forget everything that I talked about MROI, everything that I talked about ROI, forget the equation. Just park these numbers to your day-to-day life and just tell me, are all these numbers accurate? No. How many say no? How many say yes? No's. Okay, yes. Oh, and rest are non-committal. Good, because they knew this was a trap. Well, the numbers are right. Of course they're right. Nobody's going to put out there in writing and say, hey, come sue me. These are all universities who are putting it out there to sell you your packages. So they're going to say, absolutely, this is right. Caveat, though, is that this is averages. It doesn't always apply to every single thing that we do. Of course, Facebook ads are very cheap, but it's not always cheap. Search buys are cheap. Are they always very cheap? No, we know that. Once we start making those buys, once we start actually diving deep into that topic. So yes, 88% get a good job, 75% make more money, but there's always this wriggle room that they're constantly not talking about, or if they're talking about, there's this very small asterisk at the end, and then you have to go and read that paragraph of fine print which tells you that, oh, this is basic averages based on national average, which was conducted 3 years ago. So what you're getting after is your guess. So yes, this survey happens every year. This is conducted both impartially as well as by partial parties. So educational institutes collect this data for their needs. The Labor Department collects it for their needs. It's up to us to read this particular data out there and then apply it, identify. So when I kept talking to you about make sure your metric is right, make sure that you know what you're measuring, what I was trying to say is that you can go ahead and apply it to other factors in your life as well. What you just need to do is identify what the right particular thing is. So yes, they tell you that median weekly earnings is $1,700 for a professional degree, but let's be honest, we're parked here, masters and bachelors. So what that median increase in our salary is, how does that look to us? Again, this is median, so it's a conservative number. It's a middle ground. You could fall below, you could fall higher. I am the biggest advocate for education. When my parents were completely baffled at my choice way back then, when e-commerce was just growing, when everybody was learning Java and HTML, when I said, oh, I'm going to go, and after my bachelor's, I'm going to do my, they didn't even have a proper graduate course because they didn't think they had enough material to fit into a 2-year curriculum. What they gave out was postgraduate diploma / certificate courses, and that's when I started web design and multimedia. But what I'm trying to say is that when I did do that course, there were no takers. This was back in India. India still doesn't, I mean, it has e-commerce, it has online payments, but my dad still prefers to use cash when he's in India. I prefer to use cash when I go travel in India. So where you are, again, determines what returns you're getting on your investment. Back then, had you asked me, did my education pay off? I would have said, no, it didn't. I finished my course, I spent all this time and money and effort and energy. Did I get this increase in earnings? No, I didn't. I went back, I took a job with a pharmaceutical company because they paid the best. Was I utilizing my education? Not beyond my bachelor's. You will hear these case studies all the time which tell you that yes, there is an increase, there is a decrease, but what is your true ROI? Now, if you ask me right now, after having been through the journey, I'll tell you, yes, absolutely. I gained a skill set which I didn't have after my bachelor's. Did I use it at that particular time? No. Did I use it 5 years later? Not directly, but it gave me an ability to talk the language. It gave me the ability to communicate what employers out there were looking for. So I generated my own, like, I didn't go by this curve, but I made that curve. Now, sometimes, like, alternatively, my husband is a chemical engineer. He didn't have to find that path. It was clearly set for him. The professional degree, he did his master's because he did his bachelor's. Master's was the next. And then now, the growth has been pretty consistent, as the graph suggests. So again, it's all about how you're identifying where you're parking your investment and how you are calculating your returns on that. Now, this is a slightly skewed diagram. If you look up there, what I wanted to try to show is that this was a 2015 study. I couldn't get very recent numbers, so but then it doesn't honestly matter because this is average numbers. What I'm trying to say is that as you keep getting more and more education, your expenses grow. The study that they showed, they said, oh, your bachelor's would average cost around 120, but your master's only costs 60 grand, but it doesn't really cost 60 grand. And that's where we are the customers. So we as customers, we kind of make a mistake because we don't take into consideration that this is an added investment on top of what we already did for our 4 years initially. So now when you look at the growth of your rate earnings, do you see a slight decline? like the rate kind of goes down over here. So the rate here stays constant. You don't have a very high rate of increase, but as soon as you put in some additional investment from your associate to your bachelor's, your rate of increase in earnings starts to kind of take a steeper gradient up there. This kind of, but both don't always go hand in hand. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, she's talking on both sides of the coin. She's saying, yes, it's great, and no, it's not great. So what is it? So I'm not good. I mean, these are just formulas, like applying it to what we learned before. But keeping these well-earned caveats in mind, I'm going to go off the presentation a little bit and say, they always say education always pays. It never goes waste. People say you're always going to carry it with you. I try to twist it a little bit and say skills never fail. If you are studying something that you feel you're gaining something out of it, it's a very personal indicator. Am I learning something with every single advancement that I do in my education? Then yes, it's never going to go waste. It doesn't matter if your return is immediate or if your return is few installments down the road. But if you feel like you're not gaining anything because it's either something that you already know or it's something that you don't feel comfortable applying, then no matter what the metrics say, your return is not going to match, because eventually that disconnect in real life scenario is going to catch up with you. And maybe that's the point when you decide if you want to change your major, whether you want to change your direction, whether you want to decide to change your method of learning, and that's always been my my groundstone when I go about learning something and equating if I'm going to be able to use it. It's not just what you put on your resume, because you will realize that anybody can pretend to know a certain skill set for a limited amount of time. You can go ahead and for that 1 hour that you're trying to convince an employer to hire you, it's easy to learn the key points. It's easy to make sure that your resume talks exactly similar to what the job profile is listing. But when you start applying these things to your actual career, that disconnect is going to catch up with you, because there are very few jobs out there right now which give you that time to learn on the job. You absolutely learn on the job, there's no doubt about it, but you don't learn what you said you wrote on your resume, and you don't have that skill set. You don't have time to do that, because the way we're progressing right now, we're all expected to do more than what we promised. It's just that while we are thinking about ROI as marketers, we are talking about ROI as employees, our employers are also catching up to this, and they're also calculating what returns they're getting in their investment in you. So this is just, I'm not going to go into detail about a lot of things. I think I said a lot about vague terms. I talked a lot about formulas that are not calculable. I wanted to leave you guys with a little laugh before you hit me with your questions. So, anything? Hey, come on, get your returns. You sat here for how long? I couldn't have explained everything. Yeah.
So I just have a comment. I think that a lot of times we don't think about somebody's investment when they're hiring somebody, not only in that salary that we consider, right? But let's just say you get hired for $50,000, and you think, geez, this great. But the employer's investment in you is really somewhere around $180,000 or $80,000, because you've got insurance and you've got all these other kinds of benefits that are part of that you don't necessarily that come with your full time. So I guess my point is that when an employer looks at you and sees $80,000 on their balance sheet, they're expecting $80,000 worth of work.
They're expecting $100,000 worth of work.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that's just something that we had a great discussion last year with the general manager that said, you're on someone's balance sheet, and that's, if you're not bringing that value, you're not going to stay on that balance sheet. Right?
Exactly. You have to, whenever I take a job, when do I know it's time to move on? There are a couple of things. One is that there's no growth rate for me. But also very important is I always ask myself, if they're paying me X, am I worth that X? If I was the employer, would I hire me for X amount of dollars? Am I giving a return which is worth that amount of money and I know we all like to think that we're worth every penny that the company invests in us, and it's absolutely true. I'm worth more than what they invest in me, but I also need to give that back. So if my job profile does not fit the pay package that I am drawing, then at some point of time, regardless of what the metrics tell you, and they tell you that you're 75% less chances of getting unemployed, I will get laid off in the next cut because they will find somebody who does my work for a lower amount of money. So in the end, just like we have to show a return, we're all assets for our company, and if we're not giving that return back, it's not viable for them to keep us employed. Something that to add, I also wanted to point out that you hardly ever hit the ground running, not because you don't know your subject, but you don't know your company. Each company not only has a different product, but even if it has a similar product, it has different systems, it has different processes, it has different ways of conducting business, it has a different way for you to do the work that you used to do with somebody else. So regardless of whether you're a fresh graduate or down the road when you transition from one company to another, there is always a learning curve, and during that learning curve you are at your lowest possible productive self, because you're still learning to see if what you know, how you can apply it to your business. And that's when you need to make sure that trajectory is as steep as possible, so that you're covering that distance and being productive as quickly as possible for your business.
I have one more thing I'll say.
Yeah.
What kind of advice, we've got freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors, grad students, it's all mixed in here. So if you were back in this seat listening to you, what would you hope somebody would tell you about your path, and what should they be focusing on right now as students to be ready?
Number one, network. network as much as you can. Talk to your seniors, talk to your professors, attend as many you did today. Get on LinkedIn. It's a fantastic tool out there where you can go ahead and connect with people in the industry. Remember them, file them away for future use, because who knows, 2 years later, 4 years later, 5 years later, you might be interviewing with that same person who came here in some of your guest lectures. Maybe cultivate that relationship with your professors, because they'll be able to give you a recommendation. Recommendations today are worth their weight in gold. They've always been, but now it's even more, because people can go out there and check your resume of what you did on LinkedIn, and people will call you out if you're putting in wrong data on LinkedIn. It's one of the most authenticated way of confirming that you do have the skill sets that you're reporting. So network. Build those relationships. Keep those relationships, and don't be afraid to use them. You have a skill set. Sell yourself, market yourself. In the end, we're all products, and if we don't sell and market ourselves, if we don't package ourselves, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. That's number one. Number two, that I wish somebody had told me when I was in the college, was to really find the path that works best for you. Sometimes it works for you to finish all your goals, your educational goals, in one stretch. For some people, it works to break their education. It's important to recognize who you are and what works for you. Don't just follow because my entire class is doing it. Don't go for a choice just because you are afraid you'll be left out. Because trust me, if you absolutely and completely want it, there will be a way for you to accomplish that. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it's going to be quick. I don't know if doing in one stretch is the right answer, if doing your undergrad, going to school, going and working, gathering experience, and then coming back is a good one. But identify what works for you and use that. And the third would be to build your USP. What is that one thing that differentiates you from the rest? And we all have that point.
Everybody knows what that USP is.
A unique selling proposition. So when there are 100 resumes on the desk, how are you going to sell yourself? When you have 15 toothpastes in the market, each toothpaste is trying to tell you what they can give you. You're a toothpaste. Make sure that you're the best. You don't have to be the best toothpaste. You just have to be the best toothpaste for that particular set of teeth and that particular wallet that's buying you. Just recognize what you can sell on and then stick to it, hone it. Make sure that you study as much as possible, read, research, attend lectures, gather information, so that at every stage you have added to that particular unique skill set that you have decided is your own. Nobody has to tell you what's your own USP. Any other questions?
You work for a flooring company, right?
Yes.
How do you feel that going into that industry? How do you feel about that industry as a whole, or just marketing that kind of industry?
That's a great question. So, through my journey, I did my undergrad in India, and then I worked a few years over there before I moved here. And then all through my journey, I have worked for a pharmaceutical company. Then I worked for a baking company that I will, if I tell you the name, I'll probably get a few giggles from all of you. It's called Bimbo, not what the word indicates, but it's a baking conglomerate that owns a lot of big brands that you're used to buying in the supermarket, whether it's Arnold or Stormans or Sara Lee. They own all of those brands. So coming back, so I worked for them, then I worked for Macy's, then I did a brief stint with Eastman. That's how I know these two lovely people. And then I moved to Mullican. So I went from business to business, tier 1. I went from business to retailer or customer direct. And then I went back to business, tier 2 and tier 1. So in each stage, your marketing changes because your audience changes. In Macy's, it was very easy. I knew my customer. I knew that my customer was this 30 to 50-year-old woman. She was my main customer, and my messaging had to be directed at her. When I moved to Mullican, which is a hardwood flooring manufacturing company, we don't sell to customers. We sell to box stores, and then box stores sell it to customers. So my engagement with my customer is limited, but I still need to build that brand awareness. I still need to have that recognition and that ROI so that when people go to an XYZ box store or go to an independent retailer and say, I want hardwood floorings, they want to go ahead and buy that particular. So am I educating them enough? Am I reaching them enough? So while some channels remain same, my engagement level keeps changing. So for Macy's, I might have a budget of $400 million per year to direct to customers because I have to engage each one of you, make sure each one of you are getting that email, making sure each one of you, when you search, the first result is Macy's, make sure you get their catalogs, make sure you see their television ads. With Mullican, I don't have to do that. I have to take a step back and say, okay, Home Depot is doing X amount of work for me. Now, what do I add to that so that people go to Home Depot and buy my flooring, which is indirectly going to help me? So my scores change that way. Did I answer your question? Okay. Anything else? Any tennis balls? All right. If you feel uncomfortable standing up and talking, I'll close this. And then if you think of something, I'm still available. You can find me on LinkedIn. I go by the same name over there as I go here. It's Meghana Diwanji. I know it's difficult, but you won't find a whole lot of those. My parents made sure they picked a difficult first name and a difficult last name. So I saw one of those common ones out there. But connect with me. I'd be happy if beyond this particular conversation we were having, if you had any questions, if you found something in this deck that you thought was, okay, this is either confusing or not right because I did my research and you messed up, let me know so that I can improve my skills for the next time around. Otherwise, it's been wonderful me talking to you, and you guys have been a wonderful audience. It was lovely to see all the nods and the reconfirmations that I got as I talked, and then stay warm.